Sorry, everyone. Everybody wants to take their seats. We can get this started. I have a quick presentation here to show for you. I know it's your dinner time, so I don't want to keep you here too long. But I first want to start off by saying that I appreciate y'all, everybody coming out. This is a great turnout. Just something I would like to see because this is actually the second meeting for what we're calling, actually what started off as an ATV study, an ATV park study, to see if, there was an opportunity that we had down in this Newport Township area to look at something that would be some economic value to the area from a recreational standpoint. Looking at, like I said, an ATV study. I guess we hit the next slide, Elizabeth. Looking at there. So like I said, this is what this is. It's really a feasibility study, and that's all it is, a study. There's nothing set in stone at this time. So the feedback that we get from the public is very important as part of this study, because we want to understand, we realize not everybody's for this, not everybody's against this, and some people may be on the fence. So we want to try to understand what the temperature of the community is for something like this. And that is the reason that we funded this study, or we have this study funded through the DCNR ATV funding. And like I mentioned already, this is the second meeting. The first meeting that we had was actually back in February. And of course, obviously, because of the problems that we were having with COVID, we couldn't have that in person. So we did have that as a virtual meeting, and I realize that's not always the most ideal situation. So although we had over 100 attendees onto that, which again was a great turnout, we felt that it would be ideal to add a second public meeting here. So we could, since we're hopefully over the biggest hump of COVID, that we could get everybody out in person to talk about this, to see the maps up close, to meet our study team in person, and get a little more feel for, or get a little more feedback from the community, because again, that's a very important piece of this study. Just from a housekeeping standpoint, we also have, I think, over 24 virtual attendees who are viewing this over YouTube, or over Zoom, I'm sorry. Those attendees are going to be muted, and their video will be turned off. They'll be able to see us and be able to see the presentation. And just to kind of keep things moving along here, what we're going to ask is that we keep comments and questions to the end. We have a long question and answer period. We actually have this room until 8 o'clock. If you want to stick around that long, I'm more than happy to try to answer your questions. But to be able to get through all the information, because we do have a lot of information to provide to you. For those people who attended the virtual meeting, there's going to be some repeated information, but we thought it was important because we're going to see some new faces here today. So we'll try to get through that old information a little faster, so we can present some of the new information that we've been developing through this study. So like I said, we'll have a question and answer session around 7 o'clock. And then as far as the virtual attendees go, you can, you won't be able to ask questions over the internet, but we'll be able to respond to questions that you type into your Q&A box by clicking the icon. All right, so go to the next slide. And we'll just go a little bit quickly over the project overview here. So I've seen comments already that, hey, this has already been talked about. Well, you're right, it has. This Earth Conservancy actually did a study back in 2005 to talk about, the possibility of having an ATV park in the general area. And what that basically found was, that was something that the community felt was, could be supported by the community, but it was more of a larger study, a study of a lot of the Earth Conservancy properties. There were properties over in Plymouth that we looked at properties in Newport Township and in some other areas. So that was really a high-level study, a high-level look. What we're hoping to do here is be a lot more focused in, because now what we're looking at is actually one of the properties that really showed up as being a focus of that original 2005 study. It's about 2,500 acres that Earth Conservancy owns in Newport Township area. Okay, and this study, this image here is actually from a more recent master plan that we performed on Earth Conservancy property in the Newport Township area, and that kind of highlights that 2,500 acre area there. And as you can see, a lot of this area is remote. A lot of the area actually is already being used by ATV riders. So it really lent itself, not so much for any type of development, but more so for recreational type of use. And if you're familiar with Earth Conservancy, we started with over 16,000 acres of land that was former blue coal land. The first thing that was done when that land was acquired is a master plan was developed for all of that property. Coming out of that master plan, we decided to put a dedication of over 10,000 acres of that 16,000 acres would go towards preservation, conservation, or recreation. To date, I think we're at about 8,000 acres. That's been either converted to DCNR or been converted to recreational areas, as you may see, like the soccer fields down in Preston section. And we're also looking at another recreational area out by the new state police facility. So this ATV study kind of ties into that as well, being able to reach that 10,000 acre mark. So we'll just hit the next slide there. Okay. So focusing more in on this, like I said, the 2005 study looked at a much larger range of Earth Conservancy lands in different areas, but this study actually focuses around the 2,500 acres of Earth Conservancy's property, which is shown in kind of that purplish pink on that image. But what we also did is we talked to some of the adjoining larger property owners. So, and as you can see here, there's some of those property owners are highlighted in yellow. Some of those property owners are highlighted in green. And the green is actually the majority of the land, about 4,500 acres of the initial 10,000 acre study area is green, which is state land, DCNR land. And one of the cues on this, or what prompted us to do this study, was that DCNR was kind of changing their views on ATV use on state lands. So that so we talked to DCNR about doing this study. They promoted doing this study, and they funded this study for us to be able to look at not just the 2,500 acres, because talking to some of these ATV users, 2,500 acres is great, but 2,500 acres is a daylight for them. Okay, but if we expanded this out, if we did 20, went from 2,500 to 5,000 acres, or to 10,000 acres, that's something that could bring families in from outside of the area. And I know there's quite a few people out here who travel to some of these other areas to ride their ATVs. But with those people comes money and economic value. So we're not just looking at this for an ATV park for recreation, but it's also could be an economic boost. And I think what our consultant will be able to show you is that there's a history of economic benefits to having recreational facilities like this being present. So one thing I want to point out that's a little bit different from our public meeting back in February. Like I said, originally 10,000 acres was part of this study area. that included an area just to the south here on the lower portion there called Keeler Lake. And if you're familiar with that, that's now private hunting reserve. So that's something that had changed from when we originally looked at this study. So that's about 600 acres that were taken out of this study area. Okay. So if you the next slide. So what Earth Conservancy is the process right now of conveying about 1,400 acres of land to the state for conservation purposes. And this land is basically from, if you see over here, it's all this is the main study area here. That purple area over there is the additional 1,400 acres that we're adding into the study. Again, it's just from a feasibility standpoint. That 1,400 acres basically runs from Alden Mountain Road all the way over towards Sugar Notch, where 81 cuts through there. And if you bring up the next slide, Elizabeth, this is a little bit close up of that 1,400 acres. So you can see that 1,400 acres actually includes the Hanover Reservoir, which if you're from around here, Hanover Reservoir is a very popular area to be out there, especially on the weekends. So it includes that, but what it also does include, it seems like a very thin piece of land, but there's a lot of the old switchback rail lines that went out of the valley and crossed over the mountain. So there's a lot of linear areas there that are linear paths that are already there that are something that ATV riders, really like to utilize. So again, through the discussions with DCNR, because we were kind of in the middle of that study with DCNR on the conveyance of 1,400 acres, and we're in the middle of the study on the ATV. We've talked about it a little bit and said, well, let's include this in the study and see if it makes sense to have this additional 1,400 acres.
Sorry.
So, nothing the problem.
I just got to close out of this.
Never get away with that technical.
No.
But again, I guess what I wanted to say is this is an evolving study, and I think I'll bring our consultant up next, Jim Laird from Laird Associates, who will kind of go over where we are in this project right now, give you an overview of some of the background that we've done in this study so far, some of the new stuff from our last public meeting, and what our next steps are. And again, very important to get your feedback as part of this feasibility study. As I said before, we don't think everybody's for it, we don't think everybody's against it, but if we could get to a happy medium where everybody's understanding of what we're trying to do here, I think that's the best result that we can get out of this meeting. So I think that's project goals. All right. So again, we're in the study phase here. So what were our goals as part of this study? Number one goal is to investigate what the wants and the needs were of the ATV community, not just the ATV community, but the community in large. Okay, so again, what are the concerns of the community from the residents? What are the concerns of the community from the ATV riders? We also brought Laird Associates in to investigate this area to see what the challenges and benefits of having a motorized recreational area or in this recreational park in this area are. We're also, and what again makes this different from the 2005 study, we're actually developing conceptual plans to kind of give us an idea of what features are we going to have in this park, what type of facilities, what type of trails are we looking at, and what Barry has is just, again, these are conceptual plans. There's nothing that are on these drawings that are hard set in stone, but just something that really starts a conversation with the ATV riders and residents to see, what is something that that we can all buy into and hopefully get the most we can out of this park. Another big thing that came out of the 2005 study is for this to move to the next step, we need to find someone who's actually going to take ownership of this. Earth Conservancy is not in the business of running recreational parks. We don't know how to do that. So something needs to come in to kind of basically take this ball and run with it. And that's what we're hoping to find as part of this study, or at least develop enough information that someone becomes interested in this. And I've said this all along in this whole study is that what I think we're doing is we're really building a business plan for somebody to pick up and take to the next step. If somebody's interested in coming in, if they show there's enough support for this project, if there's enough benefits that are coming out of this project, we think somebody will pick up that business plan more or less and take it and run with it. But we're going to look at several different models of ownership because what we've seen from other areas, other parks that are out there, there's many different types of owners that are out there. There's private owners, there are public owners, and then there's some mixes of private-public partnerships that make these parks actually run. So we're trying to understand, what is the best model that fits in Luzerne County and in Newport Township and Cunningham Township to again, see if we can take this to the next step, because that's going to be the big piece. That's going to be the key to this, is how do we get this to the next step to bring it to a reality. And then as part of this, the final outcomes of this are going to be a report that are going to outline some of the permitting issues, some of the funding opportunities to make this reality. Also, what some of the liability issues are, what some of the insurance issues. That's going to be a big issue, obviously, to overcome. So again, as I said before, our goal is really to create this business plan for somebody who may want to come in and make this thing become a reality. All right, so next slide. All right, so I guess with that, what I'd like to do is introduce our consultant, Jim Laird, sitting over here, who's going to pick up on study progress, where, what got us to this point and where we're going from here. So, all right, thanks again for turning out. Jerry.
Thanks, Terry. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. I know you all have somewhere other place you probably would rather be, and I know you're all busy like we are. We have a fun family of 5 kids, and they're all doing their college thing and running everywhere for soccer tonight, but we're happy to be here because we are a small consulting firm. We're called Laird Landscape Architecture. I'm a landscape architect, not an engineer. Somewhat similar, but landscape architects tend to look at the world working with nature instead of fighting nature with concrete and asphalt and riprap and those things. So we're not highway engineers. We're actually, we work with nature to try to evaluate projects like this that we believe can have one arm of economic development, but also need to be respectful to the environment and responsive to that. We just feel privileged to be part of this because, frankly, being a small firm, we have worked at other large engineering firms, but we realized that we could use all that engineering firm experience and somehow marry that with this emerging opportunity in Pennsylvania, where, as Secretary Dunn from DCNR announced 5 months ago or so, outdoor recreation is our #2 industry in Pennsylvania right now. I don't know how many know that. That was kind of surprising to me, but #2 industry in Pennsylvania is outdoor recreation. You say, well, what is that? Well, it's kind of what we're talking about tonight. #1 is always going to be agriculture, because we have, phenomenal tillable acres, and it's a rich state with a lot of environmental resources and great soils. Also, when you look at the quality of the state, we have to admit, there are some places that have been marginalized. And DCNR did a study of the state, I think about 3 years ago it started. And really it was to evaluate the state to find out, how much of the state or where might it be appropriate to identify some areas that maybe could be appropriate for off-highway vehicle recreation. So it turned out to be an area suitability study. And just long story short, you're welcome. You have full access to these studies, by the way. So if you're interested in this data, the studies, talk to us afterwards, get our card. We're happy to email you all this stuff. We don't want to get in the weeds with that tonight, but just want to give you some background here. So that study basically delineated, all the resources in Pennsylvania. It eliminated, water bodies, streams, wetlands, sensitive areas that really need to be protected, quality habitats, quality hunting areas, quality stands of forests, natural resources, essentially, that we probably shouldn't be riding in. But when that suitability area was done, it did highlight in red, some areas that were marginalized lands, much like the landscape that you folks live in here, much like the landscape I grew up in over in Ashland, Pennsylvania, near, Frackville, Ashland. I grew up in a little town called Mallory. Probably never even heard of it, but it's near Elphinstein and LaBelle, Ashland, Mount Carmel. So it's the coal region over there. So I get it. It's the same. It's a very similar landscape. But I also understand the culture, and I remember the culture, and we have lifelong friends there that still live in those communities that we believe could benefit, from economic development. So the question tonight really is about how can we marry environmental stewardship to economic development, do it responsibly, bring the two together, and allow people to enjoy outdoor recreation in different modes while still being responsible to the communities and the environment, right? So I don't want to overstate any of that, but I want to just start off by letting you know there's a balance here. We're not just trying to say that, here's a great idea, do you accept it or not? There's a whole process of balance that has to happen. So where are appropriate areas? What are the programs? So when we talk about this, when we started out in this study, which by the way is funded through the ATV restricted fund, and that just means that the funds that are financing this study are actually generated through ATV registrations, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, and side-by-sides. So if you are one of those wonderful people that register your machines, and you're rare, I'm telling you, you're rare. I think probably only 1 in 6, maybe 1 in 10 people in Pennsylvania register our machines. Some people register 1 or 2, the ones we ride, but we don't, maybe we don't register all of them. So we'll get to that a little later. And that factor, think in your mind how many registered ATVs you and your friends register compared to how many actually exist. So just mull that over a little bit, and we'll get to that later. But so the thing is, this study actually already has revealed that it's not just about motorized recreation. This study actually, the second meeting we had here with Earth Conservancy and through our public involvement so far, the public questionnaires and surveys that we've gotten back, this property is actually all about many modes of outdoor recreation. Honestly, didn't know that. I didn't know there was a world-class rock climbing destination up here, and many of them. I didn't know that people really enjoy kayaking, canoeing, hiking, tubing on the river, as much as they do. You kind of assume that, but people really love this land and they want to use it. They want to mountain bike. Mountain biking is a big, evolving sport that's coming out there really strong. E-bikes, electric assist bicycles. If you can define the difference between an e-bike and a motorcycle, I'd like to talk to you about that. I think the two are merging, right? Honda's debuting some all-electric motorcycles that are race machines. So where does that, fine line, where do we draw that line between an e-bike and an electric motorcycle? But anyway, just a little introduction to say, we're trying to be broad thinking here, but when you're thinking about this property, although it started out as an off-highway vehicle study and it's funded by the ATV fund, it's really more than that. It's hiking, bicycling, mountain biking, kayaking, canoeing. It's a diverse level of sports and outdoor adventure tourism, so to speak, that many people have come forward and say, man, we'd like to do this out there. Is that possible? And well, we'll find out. If there's enough people in the community that support that, then it's probable. There were some things that we'll talk about that you'll see as we list some of the needs, wants, and desires that people have voiced that we weren't expecting. And you'll see some of those. So, but it's not uncommon. So this community actually is very common to other communities across the Commonwealth, as far as Elk, Sullivan, Clarion County, Venango County. They're all doing their feasibility studies similar to this to determine, we have ATVs here, we know people want to do it, but we also have quality forests and habitats. How do we merge the two? It's happening in the Northeast, Wayne, Lackawanna, Susquehanna counties. We have a project going up in feasibility study going on up there. Central Pennsylvania, Northumberland, Carbon, and Schuylkill counties are doing a big 20,000 acre, master plan for that area. Anthracite Outdoor Adventure Area and Rock Run are two areas that have already been well established by DCNR through the ATV restricted fund. But when you go to these facilities, one of the first things you realize is there's actually a lot for the whole family to do here. there's dog walking facilities, they're building in playgrounds, comfort stations, there's a lot more to do than just ride ATVs there. So we'll get into that, but we want to point to this map just to start off. This is actually a map that shows that, the respondents to the questionnaire, so all the public feedback we're getting, in addition to the feedback we'll get from you tonight. And I think it's safe to say we can continue that the questionnaire is still available?
No,
No,
closed in May.
it's closed, but okay,
May.
so we want your feedback tonight. So we'll take your information. If you want to remain informed, we'll keep you informed. Give us your email, some form of contact, and we'll keep you informed. Or give us feedback. If you're not comfortable chatting with us later in public and you have a good comment, you can send us an email. That'd be great. So this map actually we put together with our other teaming consultants called the Institute, did an analysis by zip code just to find out who's responding to this thing. And the map actually doesn't surprise me because what we see across the state is that a lot of the riders, and in this case, this is talking about people that use the property, not just ATVs. This is mountain bikers, rock climbers, and so forth, people that use the property. Where are you coming from? And there it shows in a shade map that a lot of our people are coming from outside of Luzerne County. That may or may not surprise you, but this is pretty common. Look, they're coming from Pittsburgh. Why would they come all the way over here from Pittsburgh? Well, you have a lot of opportunities. It's a unique landscape, and especially the rock climbing, it's world class. So people will drive long distances, and if you happen to notice, they're coming from fairly affluent areas, right? Some of our growing counties. So that's something we'll get into a little bit later as well. But look at the draw. This site is actually bringing people from pretty far and wide. So let's go to the next slide. But just imagine what's happening there. Okay, so again, now a lot of this is tailored towards motorized recreation. So we're looking at, would you be in favor of an OHV area in Newport Township? So far, the respondents that responded to the questionnaire in a large majority are saying yes, but, there's always a caveat there. Yes, but I do have some concerns. Yes, it would be great. Yes, I believe it would draw people here, but along with that, I have some concerns we need to address. And I think everybody in the room probably has some concerns if this would be considered if it would move forward in allowing motorized recreation. I think I want you to try to think about, remember that it's also hiking, biking, mountain biking. It's a truly diverse opportunity for other forms of recreation. So that's the first thing I just want to communicate. Some people just know this can't possibly be a good thing. Some other people are unsure. So next. So the whole point of this public meeting is to do just this: investigate the needs, wants, challenges, and benefits and concerns of this type of thing. Now, a lot of what we're going to hear from you folks in our question and answer time, I'm not going to say we already know the answer because we've already had some good questions. We don't know the answer. We don't know who's going to own and operate and manage this thing just yet. But we do know from precedent case studies that it can be done successfully. It can be done well, and it can be controlled. It can be done responsibly. Sensitive areas of the site could be protected, and private residences can be buffered. But you have to put some planning into it. This is not just going to be a Wild West free-for-all riding area. If that's your vision, then thanks for coming out, because we want to hopefully cast a different image of that. So next slide. Well, a lot of the people that were polled said not only the majority from Luzerne County, but a lot of them said yes, we actually ride. And we were kind of surprised, or not, to find out that most of the people that respond have been riding for a long time. Some people are new to the sport. They're probably a generational thing, but a lot of people that are riding and want to ride, have been doing it for a while. And the other thing is, how frequently do you ride? A lot of people say we go all the time, at least 10 times, over 10 times. The majority said we go riding. But the problem we're realizing here in Pennsylvania is when these people go riding, maybe the next slide will show us this, but the challenge we're seeing is that when people don't have a place in Pennsylvania to ride or enjoy their sport, whatever that is, they're taking it to other states. We have a major, massive economic development leak in Pennsylvania right now, and it is literally leaking out all corners of Pennsylvania to all the states around us. West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, Ohio, Michigan, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, even conservative New York, or conservative, wow, that was a slip. Liberal New York. Liberal New York just put up a 20,000 acre riding area near Deposit, Pennsylvania, or near Deposit, New York. And I think it's kind of, so if you're looking at New York, it's kind of downstate. Just see if I can do this, but let's see, probably like right about here on the map, Deposit, New York. So already it's drawing people out of Pennsylvania, and they're going there and they're spending their family vacation and thousands of dollars to do what they could do here, but can't, right? Or if they're not going to New York, they're going down to Hatfield McCoy in West Virginia, which is okay, but that's a long haul. And people are actually spending we've gone 3 times as a family, taken all our kids down, met other family there, and we spent a lot of money and a lot of time, but we had a world-class experience and we can't wait to go back. But just to give you an idea that all the states around us are kind of getting this, and they're doing it well. New York actually has state parks and state forests and a combination of private lands that they've figured out how to do this. They're not going to ruin the state park. They're not going to ruin their state forest. They're not going to jeopardize that resource. They're just going to do it well. They're going to plan it well. And they're going to manage it well. They're going to have rangers. They're going to have patrol. They're going to have people on staff that are paid by the fees that this is a self-generating thing. It's not a free for all. You don't get into the riding area for free. You pay a day pass or a seasonal pass. But anyway, this is that suitability map I was mentioning earlier, and this basically shows you that. Not sure I agree with the all the blue, but we could say that we definitely know that DCNR agrees that all the red areas are lands that are marginalized either through mining, acid mine, drainage, or have already been heavily impacted. In some cases, literally turned inside out, right? And if everybody in this room knows what mining landscape looks like. So here we are. This is the subject site right here. This big red horizontal area right there is actually the study area. So
Up a little.
oh, I'm sorry. What did I do?
The top crescent.
Up here. I'm sorry. Oh, well, okay, you're right. Good. See, you guys are sharp. Thank you. This area, I remiss. This area is actually the famous Reading Outdoors in Northumberland, Carbon and Schuylkill. Sorry about that. So that we're actually working with those folks. That's a huge area, the 3-county area. Yeah, so you're farther up north, okay? Over here, you're correct. So that's us right there. We're literally right there, Nanticoke, up against the river. But you can see the point is, it's a hot spot. And I didn't make this map. This came from DCNR and Bureau of Forestry. I was kind of relieved, actually. We started this study, I was like, do we have any, justification that the rest of the state and the agencies that are going to hold us accountable, in the future are on board with this? And then, of course, we opened up this map and it was like, yes, of course. You can't deny that this is marginalized land. The question is, how can we use it to our benefit as a community, but also respect the good resources that do exist? And we'll take a look at that here in a minute. Next slide. Thanks, Terry. Okay, this is the facilities and activities wants and needs assessment. In that questionnaire, most people said, first thing we want are restrooms. We want flush toilets, right? Porta johns are okay, but I have 5 daughters, okay? Those things are nasty. I don't want to use them either. If they're kept well and they're clean, they're okay. Believe me, we bought a small RV just because it had a toilet, and we were happy to have that. So campgrounds, number 2, that's a big deal. But we were kind of surprised. People said an air pump would be really good. We don't if we don't carry our own, we've had flats, and sometimes, that's an amenity we want to have. Snack bars, wash stations is actually a good thing. When we leave, I know DCR would like this because leave your mud here on site. Don't take your seeds and your invasive species and stuff like that to other sites in Pennsylvania or to Hatfield, and don't bring Hatfield stuff here, right? So that's smart. Services and supplies, that's something we could talk about later. Like at Rock Run, they have a pro shop in their welcome center. So when you go sign your waiver and you pay your day pass or your membership, you can also stop at the pro shop and pick up a helmet or the pair of goggles that, Junior forgot, or, who knows what you might need. You might even have a flat tire. You might have a broken, if your family's like me, you probably broke the clutch or brake lever before you even got it off the trailer. So you probably need to get those things. So just basic amenities, water, also toilets in that comfort station. Favorite aspects of the other parks that people are leaving Pennsylvania to go enjoy. Number one, variety of trails. This is why people love Pennsylvania. We have a unique landscape here that if you've ever been to California, we were there last year for a soccer tournament with our daughters. And it was nice, but I couldn't live there. I think California looks, at least the southern section, looks like Pennsylvania after a nuclear bomb would go off. It was devoid, it was somewhat scenic, but it was like, where are the trees? We have a tremendous resource here in Pennsylvania. We have rich soils, and yes, I know our forests have been marginalized as well, but we are so far ahead of other states here in Pennsylvania to have this rich forested tree canopy that not many people get to enjoy. Plus, we have the terrain, we have the diversity of soils, sand, rock. We just have the perfect scenario for riding, right? We have the variety. We have that challenge level that people really enjoy. The other thing that people said they really like when they go to Hatfield, McCoy, and other riding areas out west is good signage. I need to know what I'm getting into on this trip. When I got grandma in the back and grandson in the back and my wife's here, we don't want to get stuck on a black diamond trail halfway out of Green Trail. We need to know. Now when they take a break and me and the boys jump in, we want to go rip and tear, or in my case, daughters. And they scare me sometimes. The girls are crazy. But when they get in and want to rip around, they want some challenges. So we need to have a diversity of trail challenges. Just like climbing, like the climbing out here. We need a climbing area for beginners. We need a climbing area for intermediates, and we need a climbing area for the experts. You got to have that diversity or somebody's going to get bored. When people get bored, that's when they do their own thing, and that's what we don't want. We want to give them enough that we have diversity so that they don't have to make their own hill climb or their own rock climb, or that has to be part of the next phase, which is a good design, so to speak, to pull all this together and provide something for everybody. So the on down the list, we want it to be legal. We want a diversity of abilities and challenges. A lot of people said we would like access to cabins and camping. Well, we found out that doesn't mean that we don't have to provide that cabins on the site right away. They want to know, are there Airbnbs in the community? Is there a campground nearby or someplace reasonably nearby that I could go enjoy? Next slide, Terry. Okay, concerns. Here are some of the big concerns we found out. Overcrowding. So when you go to Hatfield McCoy on a weekday down in West Virginia, it's not overcrowded. They have such a vast array of trails that once people get dispersed out in the system, you may see a group of maybe 2 or 3 groups, other groups of people on a given weekday. Now on a big holiday weekend, it's a whole different story. It's really busy down there, and they have 2-way trails, and it gets busy. You got to watch what you're doing. So that's a number one concern: overcrowding of the trails. The answer to that goes back to what Terry was saying. The way we keep from getting overcrowded is that we need a magnitude of trails that allows people to spread out in the trail system, and that also disperses noise, sound, dust, erosion, and so forth. We've got to give people room to spread out so that we're not all riding on top of each other and creating unnecessary hazards. And that goes right along with safety. So when we're not crowded and we're not running into on top of each other, it's safer. Maintenance, accessibility. Those are two the top things. Security. We've got to stop trespassing. If this system is against private property, we need to have that clearly demarcated, and we need to have patrol. We've got to put some teeth to patrolling this thing. Give people enough area that there's no excuse for trespassing. You got 10,000 acres. Why are you over there? Get back on the system, and sorry, but you're fine for the day. Get on the system. Well, I didn't know where it was. Well, that's a poor excuse. We got electronic mapping now. We have paper maps that we handed you when you arrived here. Get back on the property. So, okay, environmental damage. This is important. Just like the rail trails. You know, that was a big concern with the rail trails 30 years ago. Oh, people are going to come out of the big cities. They're going to bring drugs. They're going to bring their trash. They're going to bring the refrigerators and their microwaves and dump them out on this rail trail. Well, it hasn't happened. For the most part, 98 percentile, and we're going to say this a lot, we've got our 2%. The motorized industry has 2%, just like the e-bikes have, just like probably the climbers, just like every other sport has. We've got to get our people to self-patrol and help the 98 percentile of good people need to patrol the 2%. So most people on a rail trail, and we've ridden a lot of miles of rail trails, typically clean up after somebody. There's some numbskull that leaves their water bottle behind or whatever. Yeah, maybe it fell out of their pack and they didn't know. But most people will clean up for the sake of the trail, you know. And then we do know that a lot of the motorized clubs, actually, they to keep public goodwill, a lot of times they'll do a massive cleanup for the community. And that's been invaluable to see that happen. So noise is concerned, and that gets back to the overcrowding, which is about dispersing people and keeping the trails in appropriate areas. But also, when we get to the maps, we're going to talk about buffering residential areas, okay? Next slide, Terry. Oh, this was interesting. So this is these were some surprises for us. These were actually, the respondents said, this is what we want to do. This is what we'd like to do. We either do this already, or we have to travel extensive hours to get to a place to do these things. So we were actually kind of surprised to say a lot of people in the area would like to see a firing range. Place to shoot in the guns, sight in the guns. It's not an impossibility. It's not something we thought of when we started the study. But that would have to be obviously very specifically located. You'd have to have the proper backstop. It would have to be managed. You'd have to have limited hours. Have to be staffed, basically. And all these things, by the way, if this activity, adventure, outdoor recreation area would be developed, when you arrive at this facility, there's a designated welcome center. You show up at the welcome center. Before you even pay, you sign a waiver. I don't know if anybody signed a waiver at a motocross track or a ski resort. Anybody? Do we have any skiers? It's the same waiver you sign when you go ski. Okay. And actually, this facility we're picturing is very much like a ski resort. It actually follows the same trail designations: green, blue, black. Black diamond. Very similar. So if you're here just to cruise the trails and with your family, and you have a diverse group, you're going to take a green trail. You might try a blue trail if you get Armory and want to try a little more challenge. Or if you're a novice rider and you want to learn how to be a better rider, you take those challenges and you hone your skills on the trails, just like skiing. So anyway, some of the other things that came up, obviously hiking, obviously mountain biking, zip line. We have the terrain to do world-class zip lining here. It's not too steep, it's not too flat, it's perfect. Rock climbing, it's already out there. We were surprised to find that people were coming from 6 states away, in some cases, to rock climb out here. We didn't know. It's out there, it's phenomenal. Go-karts, that was kind of a surprise. We weren't thinking go-karts, but why not? That's kind of a contained, that's a very small course, contained area that could happen. Paintball was actually a big thing that came up. We actually, I think it's safe to say, we can't name any names, but there's already been a party that said, hey, we hear this is an adventure park. Have you ever thought about doing a large scale paintball course? And so they came to Earth Conservancy and said, look, if you develop this, we want to be the ones to put in a big paintball area. So again, and paintball, apparently, not my thing, but it would draw from 6 states away. I forget the name of the other competitor. What's the other big paintball place? What's it called? Skirmish. Okay, this would dwarf Skirmish, just to give you an idea. These guys have a big vision, but they need a big area to do it. So paintball's a big deal. Archery could continue. I guess people are hunting out there already. We see a lot of tree stands out there. A lot of public areas like this can have an archery pass. It would have to be limited. It'd have to be some thought put into that, how and when that would happen. RC car track, that doesn't take up a big area. RC cars, that's getting crazy. There are actually people that are paid professionals that get paid to race RC cars. It's amazing. BMX track, believe it or not, most of the people that love BMX are in their 30s. The average age on that is 30, 32 years old. Not just little kids, not just young kids. It's actually, skateboarders and older riders. Wedding venues, I was surprised to hear that, but why not? If you're really into off-highway vehicles and that's your thing, invite all your friends and do a wedding venue here. Next slide, please. How far do you come to ride? 83% say we've been to a riding area. We've had to travel to do that. Most people have to go 150 miles or more. Well, I guess 38% say up to 150 miles. 18% said 20 to 50, less than 20, there's your locals. If you visit, how long do you stay? Most people said we go for a day. We want a day pass. 18% say we go overnight. 20% say we go several days, and varies, there's a mix of that, but several days usually means they're making a vacation out of it. This is where the economic development factor comes in. If we have a big enough recreation area that includes the diversity of different recreation modes that we're talking about, if we can keep people here for a day, that's one level of economic development. They're going to buy lunch, they're going to buy some fuel, they're going to hit their day, they're going to pay the day pass, and they're going to, be here for a day and leave by dark. But if we can capture them, if we have something that would keep them here long enough, overnight, for one night, imagine the magnitude of economic development that happens locally. We get the hotels, we get the camping fee, we get all those meals. I mean, when we ride, we eat hearty. I mean, we ride hard and we eat big. I know our rail trail people, they eat pretty light. They come in their Prius and they bring a bottle of water and maybe they carry their lunch, and that's wonderful. But motorized people eat. I mean, eat, right? So that's a whole discussion. One of the things we're trying to discover, and maybe you can chime in on this later, is how much interest is there in the possibility of not just a playpen. Like these two facilities are kind of, these facilities are actually expanding, and Anthracite is a good example where the trails have actually cooperated to connect into the city of Shamokin now. The city of Shamokin saw what was going on and they said, we got to get a piece of this. This is crazy. There's a campground just off the map here that is booked for 3 years. You can't get us, we can't get a site in that campground for 3 years. We'd be 4 years out. Obviously, that campground's trying to buy the next couple of properties to expand what they're doing. So there's actually another couple of properties that are quickly trying to develop campgrounds because they just see what's happening. I mean, you're booked for years. Rock Run is kind of considering the same thing, and we can talk a little bit about that. Rock Run actually has been developed in phases, and they just recently added a full RV electric and sewage hookup facility there. Pull through, big rigs, toy haulers. But they also have remote tent camping and some other variety of camping options. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so this is just a comparison of what are we spending our money on when we come to a big recreation area. And you can just kind of look at this. So the average fuel expenditure, $82, other expenditures, $147. I think that's conservative. We've heard from other studies like Hatfield McCoy, there's a couple out in the West, the Tennessee and the Kentucky Kong trails, K-O-N-G, like King Kong, they call it the Kong Trail system. Their economic development reports are saying that the average motorized user that comes to your community is spending between $150 and $250 per person per day. That's an average. With a big family, we're a little more conservative than that. We try to take as much food along and make our own food in the hotel or in the RV, whatever we're using. But a lot of people they're on vacation. They want to ride. They want to pay their money, have their meals, and then be ready to ride all day the next day. Next slide. Okay, this is the whole point. We envision, much like these other examples, a safe, family-friendly experience. We need diversity so that if you're not a rider, you can go hike or bike or climb or kayak, canoe. There's something for everybody. So really, it almost starts to feel like a resort type thing. There's more to it than just ATV riding. So these folks up front here were asking me, well, now how do we manage this thing? Who's going to manage it? How's it going to be managed? That's all part of the question we're trying to answer. We have some good examples of areas that have been developed, and we're going to talk about those examples in a little while. But there's a couple models out there that might be appropriate for this site. Could be privately run, could be, well, we know that we're not sure the county wants to take it on. It's a little bit big for the county, but could be private, could be a nonprofit that runs it. And then we need to know who ultimately, other than Earth Conservancy, would own it, who would own the property. But it would have clear policies and procedures. It'll have limited hours. You'll have to register, you'll sign your waiver, you'll pay your fee. And when I talk about a fee, think about it. This is the only self-sustaining or self-paying trail system in the Commonwealth. Everybody else has other sources of money that they tap into, but motorized can bring more to your community because they're all paying a fee, not only to register, they carry their own insurance on their vehicles. They're supposed to. That's a whole other thing. We need to get more people to do that. But they also come here and they pay a day pass or they pay an annual membership. So it's self-sustaining. Those monies go back into the system. It pays for staff. It pays for equipment to manage erosion and sedimentation control. It can go into tree planting. It can go into fencing, signage, comfort stations, restrooms, all these things that would make it a world-class resort type area. Well-planned routes, hierarchy of trails. We talked a little bit about that. Number one thing we've got to start understanding is trails is not one size fits all. Every group that goes out to ride, you got a diversity of talents, abilities, and skills. And hopefully everybody is either found their level that they're comfortable with, and they're going to retire at that level. You know, I'm a moderate, intermediate rider, and I'm just going to ride blue trails forever. But that doesn't mean that blue trails are good for everybody. We're going to have experts, we're going to have intermediates that want to become advanced riders, and they want more of a challenge. So we have to have a diversity and a hierarchy of trail system. If people get bored, they're going to make their own trails, and we don't want that. So yeah, skill development, challenge areas, just like ski resorts. We're going to throw a picture up here. When you go to skiers, when you go to a ski resort, there's always a place now in a ski resort where the snowboarders do their thing, right? They're sliding on rails. It looks like a BMX park for snowboards. They're grinding on the rails. They're jumping the moguls. They're hitting the bonking the dong, whatever they're doing. All these crazy, knack-knacks and side kicks and stuff. But that challenge area, you got to provide that so people aren't tempted to go make their own thing, go off in the woods and be unsafe. Signage, we talked about that. Monitoring and maintenance, you folks brought that up earlier. That's part of the program. Somebody's got to be making sure that people are just abiding by the rules. We will have rules, and we have to have order. Otherwise, it's chaos. So, structure, consider sensitive environmental. We talked about that. We don't want to oversimplify that, but to me, as a landscape architect, that's inherent. We had 5 daughters. They were all 2 years of age, and There were always the babies in the house. We needed it quiet by 9 o'clock, and we did not need dust and noise riding right outside our window. So we would not propose that that happens next to anybody's house. If you happen to live near this, we're talking about buffer areas. We need to have buffer areas where the trails are located far enough away from residences that we can respect those privacy, security, and liability. Those are the three main concerns that every private property owner has. Even if you're a rider like me, I have 12 acres up in central New York. I don't know how many kids are riding on my motocross track right now, but I don't know they're there. All I can say is, I don't know you're here, right? Something happens, I didn't know you were there. So you kind of sometimes call that an attractive nuisance, but this is going to be structured so that if you're on the site, you've signed your waiver, you've paid your fee, and if you haven't done those two things, we have a way of identifying you, either through a sticker or a strip pass, or maybe even later a sophisticated scan pass. But if you don't have any of those things, you are trespassing, and that's prosecutable. So wise up, and then if you ever come back here, we got your name, and you're going to pay a little extra. You know, shame on you. You pay extra now. And by the way, we might as well talk about it now. But when we talk about fees, we absolutely believe, just like Hatfield McCoy, residents of West Virginia get a certain reasonable membership pass for the year, 24/7, 365. Outsiders should pay more, absolutely. So when we talk about pay structure a little bit later, locals should maybe pay a modest fee to be a member. And the real reason we want you to be a member is so that we can see the numbers. That's what impresses DCNR. That's what impresses investors. If they can see the numbers, if we could just show them the real numbers, not the numbers that we see in the DCNR registration numbers, but the real numbers of ridership out there that aren't registered yet. Because it's basically like being registered to vote. If you're registered, we know how many are out there, and that changes the whole ballgame. Oh, there's not just 300,000 ATVs in Commonwealth, there's actually over 1 million. That's a whole different ballgame. That's why we see so many people. That's why we need to do something. Okay, environmental, absolutely, buffers we talked about. Next slide. Okay, so the next step is to take your feedback from tonight and develop these, what we call concept plans. We're starting to identify some areas that are away from the residential areas, and maybe they're flatter, the site may be appropriate with good road access, where we can start to envision some parking and trailheads. So we're trying to pull this whole thing together and identify, and please come up and look at this later, look at what we're thinking, but maybe you have some feedback that would say, well, that's not a good area because I live next door, or there's something there that you shouldn't put that there, or there's a big sinkhole nobody knows about, or there's a mine shaft there or something. So you folks may know that information, and we would appreciate that feedback. But we're just starting to identify some areas that it seems to make sense that if we were going to do a campus like AOAA or Rock Run, and these are pretty similar campuses. You have a main arrival area. We have 6 minutes left, or that's the time. That's the extra time. Okay, how many minutes do I have? Just how many minutes do I have? I don't want to go.
What's the last slide? 6:15, 6:20.
Okay, all right, so I'm talking too much. I want to give you folks a chance. I hope you're thinking about your questions, because that's what this is all about. I'm actually just burning the clock, conveying our thoughts to you, but we need your input. We need to hear from you. That's what this is all about. Does this concept make sense for your community, yes or no? We believe it fits the landscape. We know people already ride there now. What are we going to do about that? Can we turn it into something positive? Can we manage it well? Can we make it an economic development asset for the community, for the region? If we do it, who will come? It's like Field of Dreams. If we build it, who will come? How far will they come? How much money would they spend? How much damage would be done? Right? So it's this balancing act. So this was what we call an inventory map. And I know you can't read this, but please, again, take time to come up and look at the map, which is over there by Terry. It just kind of highlights some of the areas that we've learned, some really neat features on site. There's actually some old mining history out there. There's some sensitive areas that we're aware of. But the whole area, how many have been on the site? Anybody really familiar with the site? Okay. Anybody know how many miles of trails are out there? Just throw out a number. Anybody? Hundreds. I would say hundreds. Hundreds of miles of trails. So we've only seen a few of those trails, honestly. The haul roads and the major access areas. Some places there's a trail around every tree. And I don't think we need that. It's just like out in Northumberland County. It's just like Ashland where I grew up. It's overridden. So that's where we have to get a trail system that makes sense, that's going to be safe and organized, well managed, and sustainable. It's not going to cost millions and millions of dollars to maintain this thing. It's going to be, to the extent possible, it's going to be self-sustaining. There's no such thing as no maintenance, but we want it as low in maintenance as possible. So yeah, so there's rock climbing, there's mountain bike trails, there's some lakes and water areas, there's some old mine shafts, there's some tunnels, there's some environmentally sensitive things. There's the old retreat to the north. That's a separate property, but that's a unique story of its own. Aqueduct. So the other question is, does it make sense to make access into Mackinac? Does it make sense to have access into Glenline? Does it make sense to have access into Nanticoke? Yes, no. If so, how, when, and where? Doesn't have to happen immediately, just like the city of Shamokin discovered. That didn't happen day one. That was never part of the Anthracite Outdoor Adventure Area plan. But when the city council members realized this economic development potential, it's like, maybe we need to just try it. Let's just get PennDOT to allow us to try it. If it's a catastrophe, we'll never do it again. But they found out it was a raving success. They made it permanent, and now it's a lifeblood for the city of Shamokin. And if you don't believe that, call the city, call anybody out there, or go see it yourself. It's amazing. I lived there. I played basketball in Shamokin and Centralia when Centralia was still on fire. Well, it's still on fire, but it's a ghost town now. You've probably seen that. But anyway, next slide. Okay, this we just threw this in. We were going to put pictures all through the presentation and keep it interesting and colorful, but we just decided to not do that. Just want to put this up here. Some food for thought. These are the activities. So it's not just about ATV riding. It's not just about side-by-sides and touring. We're talking about zip lines. We're talking about potential for a rifle range and training areas. Maybe we train kids how to ride properly with a helmet. We get them certified. This is the right thing to do, the wrong thing to do. Ride smart, rock climbing, kayak canoeing, tube floating down the river. That's a huge thing in Johnstown right now. There are actually businesses popping up in Johnstown and expanding. And all they do is they basically take you from one point to the other. Not a chauffeur, but a shuttle. They'll shuttle you from one point to the other. Pine Tree is doing the same thing. There's a whole business that just shuttles you from the bottom to the top. We float down, we take you back. Float down, we take you back. This is a big deal. These are all businesses that can pop up. But imagine all the support facilities. So you could either sell kayaks and canoes, you can repair them, or you can provide gear. Now, these people, some of them don't have helmets on. I think they should, but so this is my family up in the top. We ride dirt bikes, sometimes do quads. We can't afford a side-by-side yet. Those things are pretty expensive. We got our eyes on one. But hiking, these are all things we envision happening on the site. So just, again, not all about ATVing, but it's part of the mix. Next slide. Okay, rock run. And maybe you can see this. This is an aerial Google Earth image of Rock Run. This is out in Cambria County, north of Johnstown. The original site, just real quick, when you look at this, you can kind of start to see, okay, there's a parking lot right there in the center, and the little blue dot is right over top of the Welcome Center. But you can start to see some of the trails that spread out, and then there's isolated camping areas that are primitive, mixed tent camping mixed with RV camping. But then this area right here was just recently developed. This is that big full service, pull through electric and septic system they just put in, and it's booked. I mean, they need to build 3 of those. They can't build stuff. They can't build accommodations fast enough. Okay, this is Rock Run. Next slide. So real quick, again, Rock Run. Now this must be a slow day. Every time I go out here, the place is packed. I got to wait in line. It's way busier than this. So I don't know the date on this, but anyway. So the blue building is the welcome center. You go in there, you pay, you sign your waiver, you pay your fee, you get stuff that you buy a few things you forgot, left at home. If you have a flat tire, the guys will help you fix that. They have basic repairs and so forth. The other brown building up here, a little farther right here, is actually the maintenance building. You're gonna need that. We're gonna need, equipment, bulldozers, backhoes, equipment like pipes, cross pipes, things like that. That's all stored in here. The other building up here, I think, is the comfort station, restrooms and showers. It's based on, it's a token basis. You buy your tokens ahead of time or at the welcome center. You put your tokens in, you get a real hot shower. It's really nice. Pretty fancy. A lot of the riders actually complain that this is too fancy. Like, we don't care how fancy, we just want to know how many new miles of trails you're building. So that's a balance too. We don't need asphalt parking. We don't need valet parking. We get a lot of those complaints, but Rock Run is doing a great job, just like Anthracite, at building new miles of trails and a diversity of trails every year. And people are just coming, flocking to this place. Now, this is not the parking lot, by the way. This is just a temporary parking lot. So when you come in the main entrance, you come in here, you pull in, and then you walk in here and you pay. You come back to your vehicle, and then you go to the larger parking areas, which are all over up here. So the big parking areas are, here's an example of one. It's a grass, combination of grass and gravel. Anyway, so you go out and park in one of those areas. This is just the main part of the Welcome Campus Center. So we kind of picture something like this, some version of this with the basic arrival point, maintenance shed, equipment. You park, you pay, and then you get out, you go out and park, and then you ride the trails. Next slide. Okay, this is actually called Mountain Ridge ATV. This is out near Flight 93 in Somerset County. This is a private, so when we talked about, who's going to manage and maintain this thing, Rock Run, the previous slide in Cambria County is county-owned property, but instead of the county taking on the responsibility of managing and maintaining it, they created an authority. So this authority has a full staff that oversees the daily operations of the place, any challenges and problems they have. And so that authority is in charge of making the rules and regulations, the budget, all those types of decisions. This place is called Mountain Ridge ATV, and I don't know if you can see it here, but this is actually one of those, giant wind turbine right here. My understanding of this place is that the people that own Mountain Ridge ATV actually own the land and they lease to the wind turbines. So this is a privately owned, self-sustaining riding area in Somerset County. Very successful, and I know they just added, and these places are constantly expanding. When I went to this place they didn't have any of this camping area. So this is all new within the last 5 to 8 years. So they actually have, they do allow fire rings. Some people were concerned about, well, are we going to allow people to burn fires? They don't need to burn fires out there. Most people that come out here probably bring their own kitchens in their RVs and such. But if it's determined that that's acceptable, the way they manage that is we provide the fire ring, you use our fire ring where we think it's safe to keep it. And it's anchored, you're not gonna move. And if you have a fire outside of that fire ring, you're paying a fine and you're gonna shut it down. There's somebody keeping an eye on this. So this is their welcome center right here. You come in the main drive, sign your waiver, pay your fees. These are maintenance buildings. And I think this might be a restroom facility out here. But you can kind of see there's always a main loop trail for access, and actually that's for the tower access, but that's also used as a main spine green trail. And then all through the system, there's single track. This is actually a mud bog right here. Everybody, that's not my thing. I'm not into riding my good motorcycle or dirt bike or quad through, see if I can drown it in mud. Not my thing. Plus, they usually get stagnant about the color that thing looks right now. Some people love that. There are people that'll drive out of central New York to come down here to just get drowned in that mud bog right there. And they'll do that all weekend, covered head to toe. And they're laughing and carrying on. They're having a blast. And I'm talking executives, not these people would surprise you. Paralegals, executives, you'd be surprised. That's their thing. Jeep, this is probably a Jeep run. See who can make it through in a single run or who can get you know, who can get swamped or who can get stuck or not get stuck. Not my thing, but that's something that a lot of people want to do. Single track trails, you really can't see the single track trails because they're almost like deer paths, right? That's like mountain biking and dirt bikes, typically a one-way system. The other trails are for side-by-sides, quads, and ATVs. So really good system, very successful. Next slide, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I'm gonna skip ahead to the,
Yeah.
you know, the overview of
Thank you.
our
Go ahead.
land. So
Okay.
so
Go
these
ahead.
are all over there, correct? The maps.
Yeah, these.
Yes, yeah, so these maps.
So these are, it's in 3 parts when you're looking
Yes.
at this.
Yeah. So these maps are over here. That's actually the western, we just call that the
Right.
western area.
We could look at the center.
That's the northeastern area, so that's this map, kind of the northeast corner. Honey Pot and Nanticoke are just off to the right there. And you can see the river up at the north, and this is the retreat right here. That's the retreat, just for orientation. Glen Lyon, right here. Wanami, Nanticoke. And then the next map, we'll come back to this, but the next map is kind of like the southern area down here. So just stay on that, or that, either one, pick one and we'll talk about it. So what we're trying to identify is where are the main roads? Where are some of the main routes so that we don't want to create a lot of impact, new roads. We don't want to create traffic. We just want access that's already taking advantage of some of the higher roads that can be used for access. So we're just trying to evaluate some of the areas that have already been cleared. We're not looking to clear a forested area for a campground or a parking lot. We wouldn't do that. We're looking for areas that are fairly terraced or somewhat flat. Don't have to be level, you just need to be flat for both parking, and this little sign is trailhead. Trailhead means when you arrive there, that's a place you sign your waiver, pay your fee, and you're received by somebody that tells you, here's the map, this is the general property, here's the trail system, stay on the trails. I forget what C stood for. Bill, what's C for?
Camping.
Camping, okay, possible camping, right. It's a question mark. Is it appropriate for camping? Do we even need camping? Maybe this is important to realize too. We're not saying by any means that we have to do all of this day one. We're not saying that we have, for those riders that are anxious to ride like me, we're not saying we have to take 10 years to develop this whole thing before we can turn the key and welcome people in. We're saying that this whole project would need to have a phased implementation plan. So part of the study is, what would we do year 1? What would we do year 2, 5, 10? We're not looking beyond 10 years here. This would be short term so people can enjoy it and that the community can start to see the economic development spin-off in a short term. So anyway, we're looking at maybe developing a few new trails, possibly in concept, but some of these orange lines are not necessarily trails. All of those orange lines are rideable, but they're basically haul roads or roads that exist out there. Some of them are trails, but I want to make it clear too, for those who are familiar with the site, and we were telling Elizabeth, this does not represent the trail system. This is just a few of the trails that we've been able to map. There are trails all over the landscape here. If we were to put all the trails on there, we probably couldn't see the underlying information. So some of those trails need to be culled, some of those trails need to be expanded, but all the trails need to be identified and ranked. Like, this is a green trail, that's a blue trail, this is an expert trail, right? So that diversity and hierarchy. The yellow worms, these yellow bars here are what we're just putting that out there as an immediate buffer area. So if you live in any of the houses along here, we're saying there's a buffer area that we're just for the good of the community, we don't need a trail in that buffer area. We've got plenty of room right outside the buffer area. There's trails already parallel that can get you from here to there. We don't have to be right up against homes. Now, we do understand that maybe 1 in 3 homes there's a rider. So we want to make sure that there's an opportunity for the riders to get to the trail system. So we don't want to lock it off. We know people need to get to the trail system, but we don't need to be riding in your backyard. And we could talk about that a little later. But we want to get to places like the plateau. We want these vistas over the river, the pinnacle rocks, views over the retreat. This is Hawaii, I believe, if we mapped that properly. There might be areas for single track trails. You know, if we can disperse some of that energy, get the people spread out in the trail system, the noise is less concentrated. So the more miles of trails we give people, the more the energy and the sound is dispersed. So next slide, or let's go to the next map there. Okay. Yeah, okay. So this is the south area. We don't show the 1,400 acres that Terry showed, but that basically is down in here, extending a little bit farther to the east there. So again, the red lines just represent areas that we haven't mapped yet, but we know there are trails in there. So if these trails, okay, let me just talk about this. So this is the Penobscot Ridge, right? We are proposing that, you know, there may be some trails in here, but honestly, from what I've observed, just as a landscape architect, that the south face of the Penobscot Ridge is really quality habitat, I would say. I would put that on a higher ranking habitat than the coal mine areas. It's not rocket science, but you can see it. So maybe there's a single trail through that area instead of just being riddled with trails, right? So maybe we need connectivity through it, but we can preserve a lot of that qualitative habitat and keep the trails where it's already heavily impacted. So that's kind of what we're trying to look at here. The blue areas obviously are water bodies, streams, wetlands, so forth. Next slide. Okay, ownership models. This is one of the biggest questions. We have not answered this yet. We're still investigating some of the models that we have to look at and comparing that to how might it fit this community, this region, and the landscape, the study area. These are the general three models that have emerged. It could be this could be privately owned. It could be a nonprofit. It could be a for-profit. Nobody's saying this has to be a nonprofit. Nobody can make money on this. If there's a for-profit business that wants to step up, Rock Run is actually, how is that? Rock Run is actually owned by the county. It's been largely paid for through the ATV money that's managed by VCNR, but it's actually run by a nonprofit. The people that you meet there, the staff you meet are a nonprofit. No, that's not right. They're a for-profit, right? Well, the authority. Okay, I'm thinking of. Okay, AOAA. They're a for-profit. Okay, so at AOAA, the Anthracite Outdoor Adventure Area, I'm getting them mixed up. We were just at Rock Run, so I'm confused on that. Anthracite Outdoor Adventure Area is run by a for-profit, basically a family unit that stepped up and said, "We'll run it," you know. So they get salaries and they manage it very well. They do a great job out there. So non-state pass system. So this could be, the pass system could be run like when you come to ride here, it's a separate pass system. There's always going to be private rolls, scheduled riding hours, and a season limited. It doesn't have to be 24/7, 365. We know everybody, you know, a lot of people in this area still like to hunt. We know hunters are decreasing every year, and side-by-side owners are increasing almost inversely. Private insurance, just because you sign a waiver doesn't mean the entity doesn't carry insurance. There's always going to be an insurance involved. It could be county ownership. I don't think that's the right mix here for Luzerne County. We've already talked to the county. They're not in a position to take on that kind of responsibility right now. But the models, the keyword is models, right? So the models are, in other cases, like Rock Run, Rock Run and Anthracite, managed by the county, managed by a nonprofit, or a combination thereof. It could be an authority. This authority could be set up like Anthracite Outdoor Adventure Area. And of course, that would then be, if the county sets up the authority, it would also be coordinated with county rules. The authority and the county work hand in hand to establish the rules of management. We haven't really explored this for this site, but maybe the state could start taking over some of these areas and run it like a state park. I mean, why don't we do that? Why don't we consider that? We haven't really considered that yet, but that's a possibility. It could be managed by a nonprofit. The people that work there could receive an annual salary and it'd be a full-time job. It could be a state pass system where there's a lot of talk right now about having a statewide pass system instead of having multiple passes to ride different areas, where we, the riders, I believe, really would rather have just a global statewide pass. Even if it costs more, make it easy, let us ride universal, kind of like the Hatfield system. That's still up in the air, but that's being discussed. Insurance is an indemnification. That's going to have to be considered for each of the scenarios. Okay, so just over here, we're just saying in every scenario, the activities, the events, all have to sign a waivers. You all have registration, and you're supposed to have insurance. I recommend that in all the scenarios, every ATV should be insured and be registered. If you're not registered, they don't know we exist. It just don't exist. So when we registered, it's $20 every 2 years. It's $10 a year. If you can afford an ATV, you can afford $10, right? It's less than a tank of gas. But the real important thing is they see you. You exist. You're part of the massive growing numbers. That's why we want people to get registered. So next slide. Okay. Questions and answers. Now, thank you, Elizabeth, for walking us through that. Everybody, just if anybody, we want to take a 5-minute little recess. Anybody want to use the restroom? Just get up and walk around. I know I do. My sad nerves screaming. But so yeah, let's just take a 5-minute recess. Is that okay, Terry? Okay. And welcome back amongst yourselves, or help yourself to the restroom. And we'll reconvene in 5 minutes. So welcome back in, and I'm gonna just go ahead and open it up to some first couple questions. Anybody a little bit? Okay, first you, sir. Yes. You want to come up and talk at the mic, or just go ahead and stand up?
I just stay here. My name is Joe Forte. I'm the vice president of the Eastern Pennsylvania Alliance of Climbers, rock climbing group. I'm also a member of the Delaware Valley Trail Riders Association, dirt bike group. I also hunt, I mountain bike, and I've done all these activities on that land, on the land in question. I think it's really exciting that we're taking wasteland that was essentially torn up, and we're creating a place where people can recreate and enjoy. I'm excited to see how this sort of project can bring user groups together. I think we've all of us outdoor lovers have seen that over the past year, COVID, more and more people are going outdoors, right? All of our hiking trails are getting crowded, the hunting spots are getting crowded, riding areas are getting crowded, right? And we're all kind of fighting over the same land. I'm excited to see how a model like this can teach users to coexist and utilize the land together respectfully. Traditionally, we've been the stewards of this land. We're the ones taking the refrigerators out of there, the TVs and the tires. We're the ones cleaning up the graffiti. Today I was out there doing some mapping for the DCNR so we could get some of the trails and rock climbing areas established a little bit better, a little bit clearer, so we could avoid those user conflicts. And while I was out there, I saw a summer camp, over a dozen rock climbers, and a summer camp with 20 kids out there, all rock climbing for their first time. It was like an awesome educational outdoor experience to see. It's great to see those kids out there enjoying themselves. What I want to know is, with this project, are we making provisions for these traditional users, the hunters, the mountain bikers, the climbers, the people who are currently using this land, the locals? Are we making provisions for these users to continue to have free and unrestricted access?
That's a great question. Thank you for being that brave one to ask the first question. So I hope through the presentation, we're able to see that. I think the answer to that is definitely yes. So it's all about the inclusion. It's about the diversity of different recreation modes. I admit, when we were commissioned to do the study, it's called an OHV study, and it's been funded by the OHV fund. But early on in our site visits and in the questionnaires and the public feedback, people were the biggest concerns right away were, you're not going to run us off, right? We mountain bike out there, or we hike out there, or we watch birds out there, or we kayaking canoe. It's our favorite place. We don't want to tell you exactly where it is, because it's sensitive, or we rock climb, the library. We love that place. You're not going to run us off, are you? That was one of the first big concerns as you voiced. And the answer is no. It's about that spirit of cooperation. We need to provide something for everyone to the extent reasonable, but also make the site sustainable so that it's reasonably, it can maintain with a reasonable staff that can be financed through the program, right? Sustainability financially and environmental. So great question, and thank you for coming.
I guess just to clarify, it's not just are those users going to be able to use the land, but are we going to get continued free access to the land? Hikers don't traditionally pay to hike. Climbers don't pay to climb. Hunters don't pay to hunt. They buy a hunting license, and that's it, right? Are we going to have to pay to play, or is this going to be a pay if you're using a motorized vehicle, sort of?
Well, I can answer that part of the question. I can tell you that the motorized realm will pay.
Yeah.
Whether other modes, whether that's even necessary, maybe not. I mean, if the rocks are there, you're bringing your own equipment, and you guys carry those like the pads, the safety pads, and everything. Not familiar with the sport, I appreciate it, and we interact with a lot of climbers on our hikes down in Manheim area, but so we get it. So just motorized definitely, that's a pay to play type thing, and we realize that the impact is greater with motorized recreation. Yeah. So and people are willing to pay. A lot of people in the Commonwealth right now are willing to say, "Oh, gee, if we start to see progress with more ATV trails in the state, we'll pay more. What can we pay more, please?" And we can just see the progress. $50 a year, just start off with $50 a year. What's the big deal? It's a day pass.
I think you'll find if you continue to let the locals and the hunters and the rock climbers utilize the land, they will help you police the land, they will help you clean the land, they will continue to be stewards of this land.
I think, Jim, when we were talking about that, we were talking about rock climbers and hiking and that, not necessarily looking for a fee from those but looking for some representation, that you register, that we know that you're out there, so that we say, like, hey, we're seeing a growing population of rock climbers that are coming out there, so maybe we do need to make some special facilities for accommodation. So I think that's at least the level we talked about. And again, you know, it's really up to who kind of takes the ball and runs it, sees who does that. But from the very beginning, we talked about that, like, you know, try to have something that, like you said, everybody's going out there for free. So why is the ATV rider who's going to go out there right now for free, not going to want to pay $50 to go out right now? And it's, well, you know, we want there to be a benefit. Well, the first benefit is you don't have to be looking over your shoulder as a rider to see if somebody's chasing you down and trying to give you a fine. So, you know, again, I think, you know, we're looking at different fee structures for those different uses. So, you know, probably a low impact hiker, rock climber, you know, wouldn't have something like that. But, you know, again, just to register and see, you know, is this popular use on this property?
And I just want to add, it depends to where, I mean, this is 10,000 acres, about what, 4,000 of it is owned by DCNR, so
Yeah, so there's going to be
that would be a
interesting combination
public
there too.
area.
Next question. I know we gotta have a lot of questions. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name's Keith Barrow, I'm from the township, I go up here every night, so I know Ken Pollock has a lot of that property.
Yes.
What's going on with him, and is he going to allow us to use it, what lease, how's that supposed to work?
Well,
Go ahead.
I mean, what we've got at least is a commitment that he wants to be part of this study, he wants to understand, you know, what the interest is and, you know, what the benefit is. I think he understands that this is something that really could bring in an economic value to the community that, you know, people would be on board. But I think I was mentioned before, this study is to, you know, make that connection, convince those people, convince those landowners that, hey, this is probably, you know, this will bring in an attraction to this area. This will make this area popular. And, you know, create some economic benefit for this area as well. So that's really what the goal of the study is to show these other property owners that, yeah, this could be a really good thing.
The other question, we did meet with Mr. Pollock in a meeting, and one of the concerns was, or one of his questions, of course, he had a lot of good questions, and he obviously is a great business businessman in the area. The problem is people are riding there now, so it kind of has a liability load anyway. By making this organized, he realizes, okay, well, so we can actually make a profit and reduce our liability by designating trails. And if you're not on those trails, you're trespassing. So, you know, it gets back to patrol and organization, the pass system, and it could actually become a benefit instead of a liability. Is there, you know, just always some level of liability, but we can define those, you know, as long as you're not creating a known hazard and maintaining that, you're not doing something that's deliberately dangerous, going to harm people. And, you know, there's other benefits. Therecently DCNR actually changed some of the rulings on interactions with private property owners so that property owners there are certain things that we can offer private property owners. We can't offer them cash. You just can't do that. That annuls the state's indemnification coverage for the property. But there's other stipends that could be offered to the property owners that weren't allowed as early as 5 years ago. So that's starting to change some things. But one of the biggest things that we really need to do for private property owners like Mr. Paul is we as a state need to improve the RULWA Act. That's RULWA, Rural Use of Land and Water Act. Dates back to the 70s, maybe earlier. There were recent amendments to that improved it. That added coverage for snowmobiling, ATV, and other motorized forms of recreation. So there were some benefits. Some amendments were tacked onto that improved that situation. But there were some amendments that weren't added that we really need to push to get added. Like reimbursement to a private property owner who, you know, right now the way it is, if you get sued, if something happens on your property, you can get sued. Now, 99.9% of the time, as long as you didn't create or continue a known hazard, you're not liable. But you have to defend yourself in court. And the time and the money, the resources to hire an attorney, it gets expensive, right? So some of the amendments that we all need to push for as riders is we need to get this passed. For the first time ever, there's an amendment that would say, look, if you're the plaintiff and you're a gold digger and you're trying to get a claim out of this, you know it's probably faulty, which 99.9% of the time it is. You're on the hook. You, the plaintiff, are on the hook to cover all the legal fees. If we could get that one amendment added to the rule, it would change everything. So the plaintiff is now on the hook for everybody's legal fees. You know, we would go down to like almost no claims, no faulty claims, no false claims. So just to give you an idea, that's some of the things that are happening in the background that we, the riders, the state, they're working towards better indemnification for private property owners. So that was another, question Mr. Paulo had about that. But he's considering, he's going to look at this feasibility of the study, say, what did they find out? What are the options? So this is a tool for him to consider, hopefully consider including his properties in the mix. We don't know that yet. We're hopeful, but we have to answer some of these questions for him. And for other property owners that may be adjoining, that maybe they want to put up a campground or they want to put up a cabin or two and cash in on the opportunity. That's fine. That's allowed. But support it so that the users can come and support your business, but your business can support the rider. Or maybe maybe 1 week you have an ATV rider, maybe the next week you have a mountain climber or a mountain biker, and the third week you rent out to a group of rock climbers. There's no limit here, really. Yes.
Mostly everybody would agree with me. I would think if this ever came to, happening every long week, I live right by I go into the woods in my backyard, I touch no road, nothing. Would we have a trailer to the parking area?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. So that question is happening out at Anthracite right now. There's a gun club right next to Anthracite. They've been there forever. They're like, really? We have to trailer our stuff to go 100 yards? You're crazy. That's nuts. We're not doing that. So there's conflicts, The question is, I don't want to give a definitive answer. That's a good question that has to be worked out. It's a challenge at other areas, right? It totally makes sense. If you're a member and you have your identity, it doesn't, I don't think it should matter how you get there. As long as you're legal, you drive across your property line. You're a member. That's another reason for being registered. Whether it's a sticker or it's something that goes on your machine or your helmet. I personally prefer the helmet sticker. First of all, it forces people to wear a helmet. I know not everybody likes that. I know. It forces you to wear the helmet, but it's easily identifiable. And rather than having it on your machine, because a lot of us ride different machines. You might be on a dirt bike one day, you might be on your quad the next day, side by side the third day. So if it's on your helmet, it doesn't matter what you're riding. So I hope that kind of answers your question. We're working on that. It's a very good question. And it's kind of universal to the state.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Somebody's got to be another question. Yes.
All right, so in terms of looking at this map and layout, you talk about this buffer system that you're discussing here.
Yeah.
Can you be a lot more clear about what that really is and what it entails? And can you also discuss with us the distance versus the actual use of a buffer that you're talking about? Like, what would that really be? What would that entail?
When I think of the buffer, I'm not looking to do anything super expensive, like build a big berm, offer a lot of landscaping. Personally, as a landscape architect, I wish I could say that, oh, pine trees will buffer your sound 40%. It's honestly, it doesn't work. There's a little bit of buffering. It's not like a sound wall or something, right? I don't think you'd want a sound wall in your back like you see along the highway. We're not talking about that. But when I think of buffer, it's literally a distance. It's a distance. And have we come up with that number yet? No. At least 100 feet, could be 300 feet. Maybe it depends on the property owner. And you probably have a neighbor maybe on one side or the other, maybe they're a rider. So they're a little less concerned about the buffer, but maybe they still want a buffer. But even if you don't care about the buffer, you got to think about if you ever sell your place, you want to have a buffer there for the next buyer, right? So when I think buffer, we're talking about a distance. If there's a trail right there, does it have to be there or can it be 300 feet out? If we get the magnitude of space we're thinking about, certain trails could be relocated. I'm going to say closed, relocate the trail, right? Some of you probably, and I can't speak for your property, I don't know which property, maybe there's a landform that will help buffer that. The landform will help buffer some sound. Typically sound rises, it's just an engineering, an acoustical thing, probably musicians and other people, sound generally rises. So, but the key, I'll go back to this, the key, I'm convinced, to dispersing sound is really having a well-planned, extensive trail system where people can just disperse. It's when you get that concentrated riding that the sound really starts to magnify, I believe. Now, also, there's a statewide decibel limit. You may see at Rock Run, you may see somebody from forestry or the state police might show up with a sound monitor randomly. Now, if my machine's over, what is it? Who knows? I should. 96, 99.
I think it's 99.
99 is pretty loud. I thought 96, but somewhere in that 96, 99 range. If it's louder than that, it's annoying to me. My buddies complained. He said, your quad's too loud, man. I can't follow it. It's annoying. So, I have a hearing loss already, probably, from different things, but the sound's annoying. We don't need to be, if you're riding a quad that has to have an open, closed course race exhaust, buy another exhaust. Buy a spark arrestor. Spark arrestor should be required, especially in Bureau of Forestry. That's part of the deal. Quiet your quad down. It doesn't have to be. Mine's a little bit too loud, I admit. It's a little annoying to me and my friends. So there is a decibel rating. That's already patrollable by the state, right? So that's something that could be measured, and it's patrollable. If you're too loud, it's prosecutable. So good question. Does that answer your question? So right now we're thinking about distance.
Right, well, that would be your only solution because that's how sound travels, but I think the other piece that you have to pay attention to is that you have ordinances for the township as well that are those ordinances. There are a lot more than that. So that would have to be calculated into your determination of the distance of the residence.
Yeah, no, that's a good point too. So your municipal code, if you have quiet hours, you have curfew, that's all, that overrides, that would override this, this authorities, that would have to be coordinated and worked into the mix. Absolutely. Do we need to be riding all night? Absolutely not. I've never gone on a night ride. I've ridden pretty late in the dark, but I've never done an overnight ride. I've been riding for 40 years, 41 years. So I would like to try it someday. And one of the county folks said, is this going to be 24/7? Can people ride all day and night? And I just said, no. But if that's something that would come out as a desirable thing, there's no reason you can't consider it. I know, like Anthracite does a certain number of scheduled night rides, but it's highly organized. It's managed by a staff. There's a designated route. Everybody has to have lights, light bars. There's a requirement system, right? So you have to meet the minimum requirements. There's rules and regulations, and there's a set course. And it's already prescribed ahead of time. It's planned out well, it's organized. It only happens every so often. It's not a daily thing, it's not a regular thing. Just like campfires. I don't know. I would like, a lot of people generally, if you're doing your event, you're probably having a campfire for atmosphere. Some people actually cook on it. My buddy cooks hamburgers and grills, he does great steaks. That's his thing. But do you really need to? If you're coming in an RV, you already have a kitchen on board most of the time. Would this be successful without campfires? Absolutely. We could make that work if that's a big concern. It just means you're going to go in town and buy more pizza, or you're going to eat more steak or whatever, or it's going to force another restaurant to need to be created. So I hope that answers your question. There's other ways to buffer. Now aesthetics. That's where landscape material can be used for aesthetics. You might still hear it, but if you don't want to see it, that we can do with landscape. That can be done with landscape, right? Landscape buffering. Sound attenuation is different. We actually had a video somebody sent us. Somebody was just outside their home. You couldn't even see them, but you could just hear them. They're just doing circles with open exhaust. And I can't tell if it's a quad. I think it was actually like a Jeep with no mufflers. They're just throwing donuts incessantly for a long time. And so somebody sent that into Earth and Service. I don't really know which property it is, but that's annoying.
Nobody really wants that, right? So it's look, we're just gonna have to use common sense for the good of the project, right? For the good of the cause. Just use common sense and generally respect other people the way we want to be respected on the project. So, question, lady over here, yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. I wish you would spend more time in our geographical area and not with those two places. You know what we have here? We have little bitty towns. And if you didn't know what was off the straightaway, you wouldn't even know Glen Line was here. Or it's so small. I think with our area being so small, I think you could afford us a little bit more than 300 or 600 feet. That sounds like nothing. I mean, Glen Line is a little dog, and I was born here, and I want to know where this welcoming center is going to be. That sounds huge. I don't see where we can accommodate that for our little area and make it appealing. And I don't want 300, 600 feet. Sorry. I mean, I think we deserve better. When you could go up to Retreat, you could go over there. So why don't you give Glen Line, Wannabe, all the, I don't know, I'm just talking about Glen Line, because that's where I'm from, or Wannabe, a little bit more room than 300, 600 feet.
What do you feel would be a reasonable offer for you person?
I'm thinking mileage.
Well,
I'm thinking mileage. I mean,
that just pushes all your people to rock on the nature.
well, let them go.
Okay.
Let them go.
Yeah.
So is there an answer, or, let me ask.
No, I don't know what that was.
I'm tired of hearing about Rockridge and another place.
Right.
This is our place. This is what we're supposed to be talking about.
Sure.
So where's the entry place, and the parking lot, the shuttle? Where's it all gonna be in Newport Township?
Can you go back to that slide? Basically, I'd like you to look at these maps, but we'll show
I
it
know
up
where
here.
that is. I'm just saying, where are you gonna put all that?
So it's right
I'll show you on the
there.
slide. I'll show you on the slide. So we're talking about the possibility of looking at a couple areas. These are just concepts. This is actually between Wannabe and Glen Line, right here, in between.
Next to the Dollar General?
Not far from there.
Ah, there you go.
Three-legged.
So
It's
these-
basically be across from where the compost
So
You got 3 semis that park there. You're gonna put like all these like ATV people there too, or?
It'll be further back in.
Ah.
you see these two little black boxes right there? I don't know if you can see that or not. I know they're kind of small. But those are actually larger boxes than some of the other welcome centers that are out there. So those little black boxes are kind of represent the size of the buildings. They don't even have to be that. That's just to show you a scale, kind of what we're talking about.
And that lady that walks the street cleaning up all everybody else's garbage, is she gonna be compensated more, because she won't be able to handle this? We all know what I'm talking about.
I'm not sure that people are actually bringing trash in from outside. Most of the riders that come to ride are there to ride. They're not really hauling their trash in from New Jersey. First of all, that's really expensive.
7 tubs, what are those people?
I don't know anything about 7 tubs. That's not our area of study. We're focused on this area of study.
You can't guarantee.
Well, we're just saying statistically, people aren't hauling their refrigerators, microwaves. What you'd be surprised to find,
We're talking about their
typically they're
cans, their
locals.
garbage, their diapers.
You look, find out who it is, you find out they're locals. Majority of them are locals. We know that. You've seen it in Shamokin,
We're
we've
the
seen it there.
locals. We're the
Yeah.
locals.
Well, ask your neighbors who's dumping there. Because it's happening now. We don't even have ATV people coming here. It's happening now. So who's doing it now? Right? Somebody's doing it. Is it ATVers? I don't think it's all ATVers. It's happening now. It's been happening for 100 years. Same as Shamokin, same as my little village in Mallory. Mallory's smaller than Glen Line, much smaller. But it's irrelevant. Let's face it. Shamokin just had a big meeting about this, and they found out that the lady that was complaining about all the dumping was coming off her porch. I mean, the newspapers, these are 50-year-old newspapers buried in your yard. They're not coming out of New Jersey, and they didn't just show up last week. You know, so there's some common sense to be said here, but we do believe this, and we've seen this. The people that want to come and ride, also, like this gentleman said, the clubs. When these clubs form, they're really good the 98th percentile are really good about doing cleanups. Show them the refrigerators, show them the tires in the rivers. They'll come and clean it up. We've seen it, they do it. Good point though, and thank you for bringing it up. I don't know what the magic buffer is. It needs to be something, right? And maybe there are some special cases where it needs to be a little more than others.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
A comment on the buffering though. Now, I've ridden up in New Hampshire, right to wilds, over 1,000 miles of trails. And there's places where you come down along the lakes where people have their cottages and campgrounds. Puts a reduced speed limit to 5 miles an hour. So if you want to take this trail and go around the lake, it's a reduced speed limit. And New Hampshire actually has law enforcement on ATVs with radar. If you're going over 10 miles an hour, you're gonna get a ticket if you're going past someone's house. So just another way of thinking.
Yeah, that's a good point. We just rode recently up in Potter County. We also ride some stuff. I have old stuff. They're old antiques, pretty much. 79s, mid 90s, nothing newer than that. We rode the Cowersport, Cherry Hill, that hill trail system over the winter. And we're new to snowmobile, our family, but there was times we were coming along and we're not going that fast. But you see those signs even in the snowmobile trails, and you think, now, okay, if I lived here, I get it. You know, there could be kids playing here, could be, maybe they're sleeping, you know, just use common sense for the good of the trail system. You know, slow down. You know, Hatfield, boy, we've actually seen some places where you're literally going through a farm and there's a fence along the guy's driveway. And you're like, oh, man. Yeah, this is somebody's private property. Aren't they nice to allow us to go through?
Right.
Let's just play it cool here, right?
Another point, Lewis County up in upstate New York,
Yeah.
just below Tug Hill.
Yeah.
Now that's been open to ATVs for several years. It's the same thing, where you're in places where you actually go through someone's backyard, you know, respect it. I mean, there's a sign there. And like it said, 98 out of 100 do, you know?
Yeah, it's not everybody, but I think the clear majority of people, for the good of the privilege, and it is a privilege, not a right, you know, for the good of the privilege, we're willing to self-control. And I'll tell you right now, most people, you know, if we can identify that Yahoo that's gonna ruin this, because one incident like that could get this trail shut down. I'm turning them in. You're gonna turn them in. Use your cell phone or report them later, somehow identify them. And that's something that has to happen. And it will happen. It's happening in most places. Yeah. So good point. Thank you. Anybody else? Next question. Yes, ma'am.
Question, how many people approximately use this park on a monthly basis?
Oh, that's a good
What
question.
numbers? What numbers?
That's a good question. There's no way to really know that, but we do know that there was a club that came. We're speculating where this club came from, but this club of ATV riders actually comes here annually because one of their family members got hurt out here. So they come back to do some kind of a benefit ride or memorial ride or something like that. And they had, I don't want to, at least 50 machines. I don't know what it was. It was a big group. They came from far outside the area and they do this every year. So there was 50, maybe 100 machines. A lot of the clubs, the organized clubs, do rides as a group, and they get up pretty big numbers. But it's it's not my style of ride. But a lot of people like it. You all get in a big convoy essentially, and you all troll around and you ride the trails. Like Central Mountains ATV up in Clinton County, they do an elk tour. So if you get in this chain of ATVs, it's pretty slow. I mean, they get up to speed a couple times. Basically, they're there to see the elk, spot the elk. So it's a giant convoy. They've had hundreds of units, but it's well organized. They've got club members flagging at every intersection. You know, there's a right-hand turn. Up that private driveway, stay on the trail. So to answer your question, there's hundreds sometimes of organized clubs that can come. We don't know how many people are riding. Is there anybody in the room willing to speculate on any given weekend how many riders could be out here? I'd be willing to say 100, couple hundred, right? 200 maybe? Hard to tell, right? Because it's dispersed. It's spread out.
But you do know that they're not coming locally, you know, they're coming from New Jersey or 150 miles away.
Well, that's the problem. We don't know because they're not stopping to register. They're not stopping to sign a paper. If they did that, we would know where they're coming from. And if they're coming from New Jersey, they need to pay extra.
But you're gonna pay extra. So, but, that's the problem with no registration. We don't know where people are coming from.
That's what people are saying, you know, putting hundreds of people or 100 more into the local Glen Line area. The noise, the dust, the trailers, the amount of traffic in this small secluded area is concerning.
Right, true. Now, the only answer I have to that is, again, push trails back to a reasonable place and have enough trails that people can disperse. I know that probably doesn't follow your concerns, but I hear, and that's a common concern. So you're in good company with that comment. It needs to be considered. How many? If this facility is built, it'll draw a lot. But the more people, the more money, the more staff we can get, the better operated it'll become, the better maintained it'll be, the more eyes will be watching. You know, but it's really about that magnitude. Build the magnitude, disperse the energy, and we can do it well. You know, think of a resort. You picture this, think of a ski resort. Kind of that level of management. That's what we're picturing. So another question, yes, sir.
Is there anybody who's interested in developing, who have somebody maybe in the background?
We can't name names.
I understand.
But it's a good question, right? It's a good question. Believe it or not, I'm surprised. We've had, Bill, what would you say, 6 or 8 people step up and say, hey, are you guys hiring anybody? Because I'm local.
Yes.
And we'll say I hate your job. I'm looking for a more local job. If this thing happens, can I send my resume? Please. I want to be a ranger. Or I'm retired and I just want to help maintain trails. This could be a dream job. We've had people say, I don't know anything about ATVs, but I want to start a camper because I could see that that's going to be a no-brainer, right? What were some of the other things? Airbnbs, people thought, well, how would people come into town if I have an Airbnb? Would that be allowed?
The service, like
Service.
retail or service.
Yeah, like flat tires, basic parts. I would venture to say, and I don't want to over speculate, but something like this could actually draw a major manufacturer. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me that somewhere in town, you get Yamaha, Kawasaki, Honda, Suzuki, KTM, you get a dealership. Now I know American War Horse doesn't want to hear that. But maybe they put a branch here, a small branch, right? So that kind of service, a reciprocal benefit could happen. If I were them, I'd be thinking about that, right?
Lucerne County doesn't want any part of that, don't have an authority or anything.
I can tell you this, the county right now, as it stands right now, the county does not want to take over responsibility.
I work with Lucerne County.
I think they like the idea of the authority. That was kind of a new concept.
That's right.
Yeah. So, and we put them in contact with those other authorities. And the authorities, this is really interesting. We found this interesting. I reached out to those other organizations. And I was thinking, these people aren't going to want to help us. That's competition. Why would they help us? That's competition. But this is the opposite. Pat Mack Pat Leo and Pat Mack, I get them confused. One is at Anthracite, one's at Rock Run. These guys are phenomenal. They're old school riders. They got involved in this to propagate the sport, to provide legal, safe areas to run. So they went out on a limb at great risk and started these things. They're highly successful, but they are more than willing to share. And share not just all their success, but the lessons learned. Don't make this mistake. We did this, and it was absolutely a big mistake. Learn from our mistakes, learn from our successes. So those people are on hand and willing to take any call the county would be willing to, or anybody would call. So in setting up the authority, we do know that the county is not going to take that on right now, but the county does like the concept of economic development. I mean, that's what the county needs to do, right?
I think this is, we would blow everybody else away. We're going to Rock Run next week.
Okay.
And we love it, but
Well,
once a year, but this place would love that.
I agree with her. We've been to Rock Run many times, and it is appropriately named. If you've been to Rock Run, it is rocks. I mean, it is rocks and getting worse. They're just getting rockier all the time. The little bit of we've seen, and we've ridden through some of the area, the bit we've seen, you guys have world-class trails. I continue to say it, Terry kind of like, really? No, you have world-class trails out there. People would pay to come and ride these trails. And I gotta say, it's thanks to you riders who are out there maintaining these trails. You know who you are, no names, you know who you are. You've got something that people will pay to come and ride. Will you have to share it? Yes, and I know that's painful. Will some people be jerks? Absolutely. But the majority of people are just like you. They just want a safe and little place to enjoy with their families. And they're gonna treat your place just like you would treat their place, right? So I hope that answers the question. And by all means, please contact us. We'd like to keep dialogue. We'd like to, we were actually thrilled to find out that, no names again, but some of the county staffers had really good ideas. We had one gentleman that said, if we had all 10,000 acres, wouldn't there be plenty of room for something like a rally car race? Could you do that? Why not? You know, if we could find a room and it fit in appropriate areas, imagine what that would do. There's no reason we can't. You could host an annual, maybe you only do it every 5 years, but Ridge ATV, all these other places, if you host an international GNCC race, the economic development spinoff from that is, I can't even tell you what the numbers are. That'd be speculative, but it's fantastic. And it's widespread, but anyway,
Jim,
next question.
so,
Bill.
Well, you and I, we're used to looking at plans too, and I think, you know, that comment earlier about, well, you put 100 people out there and you're bringing 100 people in here. Remember, we were going to put a football stadium or some football field just for scale on that site plan, and this is immense. I mean, you really don't understand, well, some people do that have been out there, but the immense size that we're talking about here, where people will be spread out. It's not like everyone's going to be sitting in your backyard, you know, per se. So I think there's a large area we're talking about here that unless you're actually familiar with the site and have ridden it, you may not understand that. And then I'll say my point too. Quick.
Yeah, I actually want to introduce Bill. Bill's on our team. Bill's a landscape architect, trained like myself. And he's got some of the concerns that we have, balancing the environment with the opportunity and riding and making it work so that we can propagate this sport and keep it alive in Pennsylvania. But Bill actually serves on the DCNR Trails Advisory Committee.
Right,
He's
yeah, the
volunteered.
last 6 years.
Last 6 years.
I'm not in this year.
Yeah.
I can't do another term.
Yeah, so he's off the committee now, but Bill's volunteered to serve as the accessibility person. So Bill, tell me
I
a little story.
represented people with disabilities
Yeah.
and I had CP since I was born. And Jim, who I met, was representing motorized,
Off-highway motorcycle.
off-highway motorcycles. I was representing people with disabilities. And Jim said, hey, why don't you come out to Rock Run back in 2019? We're both landscape architects. We also had other discussions, but it's like, yeah, okay, I'll try it. And I'm a big NASCAR fan, been into auto racing all my life, so watching it and lately running a couple cars. But Jim got me out there on a Honda TRX 450. And even though I couldn't shift very well, boy, I got the bug. I want to do it more. I've been out, I guess, 6 times or so. And for accessibility wise and keeping up, actually, I ride a bike on trails with people, but I always kind of lag behind. With the ATV, I don't lag behind. I'm with the group. I'm not separate from the group. So in terms of inclusion and accounting for my disability, I love it. And it provides accessibility and like you said, multi-generational. You could have your little kids out there in a side-by-side or even on their own little machines, and you can have the grandparents out there as well. So it really opened up a whole new world for me And I just sold a house on Friday, and one of the first things I'm gonna get is a trailer and a machine, so it's on my, you know,
Yeah,
quick buy list.
that's great. Thanks,
And if
Bill.
there's anyone that needs any insight into that, I'd be happy to talk more about it. Also, Joe Forte was happy to, if you got any calls for interviews, I may have been the person you spoke to, and Joe was my first interview, and he opened my eyes as to rock climbing and things that are going on here currently, or for 40 years or more, and actually world-class climbers that have come out of this area. So I mean, it really is an exciting place, and I'm from down near Philly, and I love this place up here, so.
Well, thanks for sharing, Bill. I
Sure.
appreciate that. So one of the other things Bill has experienced this whole, through the COVID year here is, like everybody else in the world right now, he can't find a machine. There's nothing available, right? He can't even find a machine within 6 states in a crate. I was blessed to find a motorcycle recently. It popped out. It was 3 things popped up and wasn't expecting. They told me wait till the 2022's come out. And why do I mention this? Here's the thing. During COVID, whether they're using their stimulus money or whatever, people have had unprecedented time with families, and they've been outside. People have been spending time outside like never before. People have rediscovered nature and are getting outside, spending time with families. The neat thing about this advent of the side-by-side, the side-by-side is literally sitting side by side on a seat or in 2 seats, bucket or bench, next to somebody, and you're driving a unit, a steering wheel. You're driving it like a car. So the side-by-side really has revolutionized the opportunity for families, this husband and wife largely. So how many people have had a chance to do it, riding side-by-side as husband and wife? Okay, so, but if you ladies in the room too, it's like that's opened up a whole new opportunity for us to do life together instead of the guys just going out and riding quads like hunting camp. This we could do together. And if we get a 4-seater, we can bring grandma or the grandkids or both. And a lot of people, you know, we have more pets in American household than children now. So they bring their pets along. That's a common thing. So it's just, I just say that to remind everybody that the sport is evolving. I don't know what we're going to see in the next 5 or 10 years. I can only imagine. I can tell you this, that, well, Honda has already debuted an all-electric motorcycle. Several manufacturers have done this, but it's not really available just yet. But imagine this, in the next 5 or 10 years, my grandkids probably may never ride an internal combustion engine motorcycle. I mean, Loretta Lynn's is going on right now as we speak. Is anybody following Loretta Lynn's motocross Olympics? Anyway, that's happening down at Loretta Lynn's Dude Ranch in Hurricane Hills, Tennessee. That's like the Olympics of motocross racing. But anyway, the neat thing is the whole industry is going electric. Little kids on KTM's 60s and 50s and 65s, that's all going electric. So in our lifetime, we're going to see most of these machines, many of these machines transitioning to electric. So what's that mean? Big deal. What it means is we're dropping emissions, we're dropping noise. We don't drop the erosion because we still have tires, but we're dropping a lot of that stuff. A lot of those concerns, the noise the neighbors are concerned about, emissions, carbon footprint, all that stuff drastically drops. So the hope is that we can continue to work for a greener environment, more sustainable. I don't know if I can ride an electric machine. I'm used to the noise, the vibration, and all that good stuff, but that's the way of the future. That's the reality. Those machines are on their way, and they're already out there. So yes, sir.
Okay, with the rock climber down there. He's saying about the rock climbing. I live in Newport Township my whole life, 56 years old. I'm riding for 45 years already out there. I see the rock climbers, I see the hunters, I see the kayakers on the river. As a resident of Newport Township, I have all these things. Why do I want to open up to everybody else? How does this benefit me? I dealt with this the last 4,500 acres I pulled up from DCNR. I've been screaming for a year to get a gate down there because there's hundreds of ATVs that come in, and it's so loud and deafening, and the shooting and the noise and the littering They put the gate up, it's like living in heaven. Why would I want that back? That's where she's coming up with the buffer system. That's actually almost a half a mile from my house. But if you look where the water's at, they call it food water. It's a big cave hole, and it echoes, and it's loud. And that's the main straightaway right through there. So how does this benefit me? The economic impact, yeah, for everybody else, I don't know, from business, I retired in 6 years.
Yeah.
You know, and like, who's gonna support this? We have one ambulance.
Yeah, why would they have that gate open?
Huh?
They open this up for everybody, I'm not going to get to,
Yeah.
they have that gate open. If the riding area, the parking area is down in the Wannabe field,
So
they're
they're
not
all
gonna
gonna,
leave your gate open, I believe, I don't think that'll be the goal, that would be their designation.
yeah, but they're still gonna come down that way, and making the trail come down through PCR land. That's where we all live.
Not for the shooting too, I mean,
That's what I was dealing with. People from Edwards rolling down there 12 o'clock at night with ARs.
What this is.
Which I know that's not gonna happen now, because if you're gonna patrol it, you throw out a lot of rules, and then you say, well, you're not gonna run it, you're giving it to somebody else. Well, if I hit the Powerball tonight, makes $50 million, for it, you say, who do you want? And then we would set down guidelines, but I can run 24/7 if I wanted to.
I don't think
Maybe
we
my
might travel all the way
job.
around, to come down to the.
Well, they're talking about going on. We're going right past my
I think
house.
the guys that are shooting illegally at night, I don't think they're gonna come in from where I live and work their way all the way down where you live and shoot. I mean, if that gate's open, they're going down. There's not-
Oh, yeah, but the shooting, everything's done now, but the writing's gonna continue.
But the idea is that it's
You know?
controlled and there's designated areas to do those kind of things. Now, yeah, you're saying there are gonna be people who are gonna violate that, but it's up to the organization to kind of control that.
It might,
So-
it might even be better for you, because they'll stop it at a certain hour, and it won't keep going on and on and on.
Well, I don't hear nothing now, so it's great.
That's what I mean.
You know,
It's
it's all-
it would benefit you guys.
Well, benefits me now, because I don't hear
What he's
anything.
talking about though is, it was all set the clock by this guy, he was down there, and he would shoot for maybe 1 to 2 hours. I don't even know where he's getting the money. And it'd just be bang, 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 constant. And it was constant, it was almost every day. And then sometimes 11 o'clock at night, he's back there again.
I mean, there just needs to be some sort of discipline.
That's-
Well, and the problem is,
It was before, but.
You go out to
Rock Run, any of these places, there's no shooting.
There's no nothing.
There's
It's awesome.
patrol.
It might be better.
There's
for
control.
all.
I'm not arguing,
No,
I'm
no,
just
I
saying, what he says is true. I mean,
Because
it was-
it'll be patrolled, it'll be less of all that illegal.
There's no rules, there's no regulations now.
That's right, but there will be that.
it's the Wild West right now.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Right, you can talk to anybody from DCR and who works on it with the state forest, they don't have people to go out and patrol the land out there. So that's actually where the benefit comes in to having this, is that, you know, if the state agrees to do this, there's gonna be those people out there, and it's not gonna be the state people who have to do it. There could be a separate organization that comes out and does that patrol, so that those types of incidences don't happen.
I'm just.
Oh, no, that's great points, it's great points, that's obviously something that's been happening out there. The only way DCR was able to control it was with the gate, because they don't have the people to go out and patrol the areas.
Well, they still come down. They're down there once a week, I see it.
Right, but
Now it's quiet, so now I don't hear quads, I don't hear APVs. Why should I open up now to 100 people again right down there? It doesn't benefit me at all.
That's what hopefully we show in the study, is that there's a big benefit for the whole community to do something down there.
There's 10,000 cars. Is there somewhere else proposed parking at all? Or it's just?
Well, again, this is the concept.
Right.
Okay, so the parking area was situated where we felt the traffic coming in wouldn't impact the adjacent communities. They're coming in off the state road.
We only have one road in and one road out in one line. When something happens in town, we gotta go 20 miles around.
But this is not situated in Glen Lake, it's not situated, at least this, the concept that we have. It's not situated in Glen Lake, it's not situated in Wannabe, it's in between those areas.
It's the same road.
It's the same one.
It's the only road in and out.
Well, actually, if I could offer something, just while you're saying that, there's no reason the main spine trail could be used for authorized access, emergency, ambulance, police. In other words, if it's a green trail, it could be, maybe the main spine could be an access road. for authorized only, ambulance, police, so forth. Maybe that becomes a bypass for that, just that type of emergency. Just throwing it out there. I can see that happening because ambulance, police, and authorized people would have access to the system anyway. So if that was an emergency, I can see the main spine road basically is a road, gravel road. I wouldn't recommend paving it. That gets expensive, not necessary. But by all means, just putting it out there, I could easily see a detour route being used for emergency access. Yeah. I don't know if we addressed your question up there, sir, but I appreciate you sharing because it sounds to me, and I'm speculating, it sounds to me like you have a local. If it's the same guy that's doing this every weekend,
No, it's from Scranton.
turn them in.
They did, they busted them. They
Well-
fined them. So that problem is gone, but I said now the problem's gone.
Okay.
So now it's quiet, but now I'm gonna have 100 ATVs riding around.
Yeah, still.
You know,
Yeah.
and, Newport Township doesn't have an ambulance. They have nothing. Montmartre doesn't have an ambulance.
What does that mean?
There's nothing here.
Now there's
And who's
something.
gonna support all this?
There's something I think, I'll go out on a limb and say, the ATV fund, the local municipalities can use, if you provide a riding area, you can tap into the ATV fund, we can get you equipment. You meaning the local fire company. You guys already do that? So which fire company are you with? Newport Township acquired an ATV for emergency access through the ATV fund or just separate? Okay. But I know a couple other entities that have applied to the ATV fund to get equipment for your local municipalities. So just throwing that out as an opportunity that if you need those things and you provide this kind of community service, that's just part of the infrastructure and the equipment. So that's eligible.
I think we have time for one more.
Yes.
Question for.
Yes, sir.
This might be more for you, sir. If this doesn't happen, what will happen in the future? Yeah, what would be the alternative? Because I think a lot of people will look at things are gonna stay the way they are.
Right.
And I don't see that happening.
Well,
I know
that's a question. If I was,
See, but-
yeah, it's hard to see. I mean, if I had a crystal ball, I probably would be.
Would it stay DC on forestry land? Or
Well,
sold off?
I mean, obviously, keeps in our part, the state keeps in our part, a portion of the 2,500 acres go to conservancy land. Like I said, we've done 2 studies in this area, and that seems to be the use that keeps popping up is like conservation, recreational type of use. We'd really like to see that used for some recreational purposes, but, there's maybe other opportunities there, but we'd really like to see something like this happen, because I think it's something that, we deal with ATVs on our land on a daily basis. Right now, ATV use on our land is illegal because of the legal issues. Okay, we're covered somewhat under rule of reliability, but that doesn't keep us from having legal issues. But, so we would like to see something happen with that land. We think this is good use for that land. If this doesn't happen, I have no idea what would be a problem.
Probably will continue the way it is.
It'd be very well.
You take for instance what the Warhorse did, we've been riding up those trails since the 90s. All going up Route 6, you've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of acres. Warhorse seen a big impact on it, they started to pay the right way rental. Now people coming from out of town that parking from Carbondale all the way down to Dunmore, from parking, they're just paying the ride. They're paying the gas stations, it's all organized. They see a huge economic impact. I'm surprised you guys didn't touch on that. That's Lost Trails. That's a local, and that's all. And then they host ACA events, they host other events there that bring in people from all states, organized, and local clubs are running it and everything. Where it's off Lost Trails accountability and everything, and the AMA's funding it, insurance wise and everything. That's local. All the guys from out of town using that for years upon years upon years. Same thing that would happen down there.
Yeah, that's another good example. I know we need to dwell on this as the lady reminded us. So we'll focus on this. But as the other lady up here mentioned, one of the two or three people said, hey, you can't rent an ATV anywhere in the state except for maybe Lost Trails and one place out on the Ohio border.
They're booked.
where can we run an ATV, right? Maybe I have a big group event and I have 6 extra riders, like we just had an event where we brought in some non-riders for the weekend. We just wanted to get them exposed, but include them, so we got some bigger machines and rent them. Well, actually, we couldn't rent them. We had to work with the local dealership. It was really complex. They basically loaned them to us, and we were on the hook for any damages. We had some damages, so we paid it. You know, we're happy to pay it because it was a great experience. But there, 2 or 3 people said, look, if you guys build this, I'm gonna invest in, I need to know right away, because I'm ready to buy a property. I wanna rent ATVs, or I wanna service ATVs, or I wanna somehow serve this thing. This is a cash cow. I wanna take advantage of this, and I wanna live here. I wanna stay living in Glen Line. I wanna stay living here. I don't wanna have to move away. I don't wanna get a trucking job that's gonna take me away. I wanna stay right here. I wanna do something local to build my own, future here. So we hear that. Yes, sir.
I can confidently say, based on the riding areas down where I live, Nescahoning, Jimthorpe, if you continue to allow this to go the way it's been going, the future of this land, more and more users from New Jersey and outer state, our surrounding states will come in and use it illegally. And these trails will get trashed and they'll get shut down.
Some other areas are getting filled up with warehouses.
That's not like that's.
So this will preserve.
More warehouses here, we don't want.
This will preserve, we've got to formalize it, make it legal, make it organized, and you'll keep your riding areas if we do something with it. If you don't, it'll get trashed, it'll get thrown away.
All right,
Thank
well, I think we should probably wrap up now. I know we've kept people here for quite a while. Appreciate all your time and comments. I think we do have comment sheets
Yes.
on the way out. If you still have some comments that you didn't, were able to express for tonight, please fill those out and leave those with Karen or Elizabeth.
Yeah.
And, we'll try to address those, but anything that we don't address tonight, we'll have addressed on our website. Any of those comments that we have. So again, thank everybody for coming out, spending your time, spending most of your evening. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.